Great. Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome. I'm Caroline Palmer from the Minnesota Department of Health Safe Harbor Program, and I help to coordinate the Human Trafficking Task Force meetings along with our Sexual Violence Prevention team, Mary Hopkins, Julia Tindell, and Marissa Regay, as well as Injury and Violence Prevention Unit Supervisor Beatrice Menento. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. As you sign in, please be sure to introduce yourselves in the chat and let us know where you're from. The Minnesota Human Trafficking Task Force is an informal statewide network made up of people from around the state. The purpose of the task force is to address human trafficking in Minnesota through services, response, and prevention. This includes sex trafficking and sexual exploitation and labor trafficking and exploitation of individuals of all ages. We convene these quarterly meetings, which include presentations to keep us all informed, especially during this time when we cannot meet in person. While we cannot have an in-person discussion, we encourage you to send chat questions throughout the presentations, and we will answer them or follow up. We have over 1,300 people from around the state and outside of Minnesota who are signed up for the task force list, the Sex and Labor Trafficking Prevention Network listserv called MNSTPN, and the Facebook page. Please sign on to these lists if you're not already on them to receive updates. Our meetings are recorded, and the recordings are made available on the Trafficking Task Force website about a week after each meeting, and we will send an email announcing when the recording is available. Today we will begin with a legislative update with advocates who are working very hard at the Capitol on a variety of issues related to safe harbor and homeless youth. We will be joined by Beth Holger from the Link and the Youth Services Network, Bukola Oriola from the Enneton Story, Sarah Ladd from the Department of Human Services, and Madeline Lohman from the Advocates for Human Rights. After the update, we will begin our presentation on technology-facilitated intimate partner violence and trafficking. Sheriff Tim Leslie, Chief Deputy Joseph Leko, Captain Jim Gabriel, Commander Richard Schroeder, Electronic Crimes Analyst Meredith Peik, Electronic Crimes Analyst Derrick Warnecke, are all here from the Dakota County Sheriff's Office. I'm hoping I didn't butcher anybody's names too badly there, but please correct me if I did. And then Bobbi Pazdernik from the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension Human Trafficking Task Force that works with investigators will be joining us as well. And we'll be learning how technology is used to facilitate human trafficking and ways that law enforcement use electronic devices to help solve and prosecute cases related to sexual assault, domestic violence, dating violence, stalking, and of course, human trafficking. And finally, we will hear from the newest member of the Violence Prevention Unit team working on sexual violence, that's Julia Tindell, and she will be talking about preventing trafficking by creating safe online spaces. So as always, thank you so much for joining us, and I am going to pass things off to our legislative reporters. I'm not sure who wants to go first, but anybody can start. Go ahead, Beth, I see you.
I certainly can if you'd like me to. Thank you so much, Caroline, and everyone for allowing some time on this very important agenda today. My name is, again, Beth Holger, and I work for the Link, but I'm also a member of the Youth Services Network, which is a statewide coalition of homeless youth service agencies, as well as many of the Safe Harbor funded grantees that work with youth. And we have a policy subcommittee, and each year we promote a policy agenda really working on the Homeless Youth Act and Safe Harbor and efforts to reduce and end youth homelessness and trafficking. And so this year, our legislative agenda was that we are advocating, and we put in a bill to ask for an increase of $50 million to our state's Homeless Youth Act, as well as a $300,000 one-time study to look at pregnant and parenting youth who are experiencing homelessness with their children. And the status of that bill right now is really exciting. I should preface this by saying we have been working on the Homeless Youth Act since 1999, youth workers and youth themselves. And at this point, the funding is in the base at 11.238 million over 2 years. And our legislative ask this year is in the House Omnibus bill at $20 million for a base increase to the Homeless Youth Act and $300,000 in a one-time study for pregnant and parenting youth. So we're very thrilled about that. And again, if you're not familiar with the Homeless Youth Act, it's an incredibly inclusive bill that, like I said, that was written by youth workers and youth themselves. And so it can fund anything from street outreach and homeless prevention all the way through permanent supportive housing for young people and everything in between. And then for Safe Harbor, or I'm sorry, and also the Homeless Youth Act is in the governor's budget recommendations at an increase of 11.238 million over 2 years. And currently it does not have any budgetary increase on the Senate side. However, we are hopeful that with having hearings in Senator Abler's committee, that we will be able to get something during the conference committee. Right now, he did put in a one-time appropriation of about $1 million for capital funds for youth emergency shelter for homeless youth. So that is the Homeless Youth Act. For Safe Harbor, what we did was we asked for an increase of 20 million to the base for Safe Harbor and it's a little bit trickier with Safe Harbor. Some of this, as you know, is directed to the Department of Human Services, Office of Economic Opportunity for street outreach, emergency shelter, and housing for sex trafficking victims. And so out of the 20 million, we are asking for 9 million of that to be directed to street outreach, emergency shelter, and housing for youth victim survivors of sex trafficking. And then another 9 million to be directed to the Minnesota Department of Health for Safe Harbor supportive services, and an additional 2 million for Safe Harbor regional navigators. So that is what the ask is. And we also asked for 300,000, and this is the second or third year we've brought this forward, but we would really like a study done to count the number, the actual statewide number of youth and adults who are victim survivors of sex trafficking in order to really get a good scope of what the problem is from a statewide, very inclusive perspective, so we can keep working on our anti-trafficking efforts for youth and adults. So we are asking for $300,000 in a one-time appropriation for that study. And then we are also asking for the 20 million increase for the overall shelter, housing, and services. And right now, where everything sits is that it's very exciting again on this front. The largest numbers we've ever seen, and these could always change, we still have a month left, but largest numbers we've ever seen for Homeless Youth Act or Safe Harbor. So we are looking at, in the House side, we are in at a $15 million increase for Safe Harbor and the $300,000 for the study. On the Senate side, we do not have anything appropriated at this time, but we're very hopeful that during the conference committees, we will be able to negotiate something for Safe Harbor, since it was allowed to have hearings in the Senate. And also in the governor's budget recommendations, there was not anything allocated for Safe Harbor. But we're very, very hopeful for both of these bills, and just incredibly grateful to all of you and everyone that's been so supportive, whether it was giving information, testifying, or advocating. We truly appreciate all of your help. So those are all of my updates. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Beth, and to the Youth Services Network for all of your amazing work at the Capitol. And we will all send good energy to make sure everything ends up where we want it to be. So again, thank you so much. All right,
Thank you
I'm going
so
to pass
much,
it on
Caroline.
to Sarah Ladd. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone. I am Sarah Ladd. I'm the DHS Human Trafficking Child Protection Program Coordinator. Sorry about my voice today. I have a little cold. But so what we have going on legislatively related to trafficking, first is that our DHS Child Trafficking and Exploitation Work Group has developed a proposal that was introduced last session that would create a non-caregiver sex trafficking assessment instead of having that be a family investigation. It would be an assessment. And that bill has been heard in both the House and the Senate, and similar sorry, I have my daughter with me today. Similar to the bills that Beth just spoke about, they have been included in the House bills and it has had a hearing in the Senate, so we do hope that it would be all negotiated during conference and that this could pass this year. So that's where that one stands. We do have two DHS bills that include some funding for staffing at the Department of Human Services that would be related to trafficking. One is our Indian Child Welfare Act bill that would have a permanent position dedicated to developing a more specialized response to trafficking and exploitation within American Indian families, with American Indian children and families. And that would be a permanent position that would be a tribal liaison, working with the tribe to develop those responses, building off of the grant-funded position that we have right now. And we will have someone starting in that role actually later this week. So I look forward to introducing that person and that work to you all in the future once it begins. And then finally, we do have a training position that would work on Family First Prevention Services Act related training that has to do not only with the trafficking specific specialized setting, but across the board with the residential services and prevention services under Family First. So that position would also be supporting our work in the training area. So that's all I have. Happy to answer questions if people have them. So thanks so much for having me, Caroline.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Similarly, we'll be sending good energy to make sure that those things that you've been working so hard on end up passing through the legislature. And yeah, definitely, if anybody has any questions on what Beth or Sarah have reported on so far, please put them in the chat. Madeline Lohman, do you want to go next?
Can I pass it off to Bukola? I am returning from kid drop-off, so it would be great to hear from Bukola first.
All right, go ahead, Bukola.
Okay, good morning, everyone. So please pardon me because this is my first time doing legislative updates, so I'm a baby in the business. My name is Bukola Oriela from the Anyton Story. And first, I would like to thank Caroline, the MDH team, and Agent Bobbi Joe, and all our work group members who work with us to make this a reality. We started this as a Bush Foundation grant to help raise awareness and consciousness of Minnesotans about labor trafficking in 2020. And we are still working on the project. And part of it was to educate Minnesota legislators. And when we made the first legislature, Representative Tim Miller, he took it on and authored a bill to create a work group to assess the needs of labor trafficking and make recommendations to the legislature for preventing labor trafficking and also providing services. We were lucky enough to have one hearing at the Public Safety Committee in February. It was successful because there was unanimous vote. Unfortunately, we got stuck going to the Senate because we do not have any bill author at the Senate yet. And we understand that time is up now, but we will still be working behind the scene and with the bill author to make sure that we raise awareness about labor trafficking. Not only that, but also to provide services to victims and survivors of labor trafficking as much as we do for those experiencing sex trafficking in Minnesota. Thank you. Caroline, did I miss anything?
Oh, you did a great job. Thank you, Bukola. Bukola has really started a good conversation at the Capitol about labor trafficking, and I know we're going to hear a lot more about that as we prepare for the session next year. And Madeline Lohman has also been part of that conversation too, so I'm going to turn it over to her.
Good timing. I have managed to actually make it home. We also had a bill regarding labor trafficking.
Madeline, we can't hear you. You're frozen.
You know, I wonder, Caroline, if any of our presenters might be able to respond. We did get a question in the chat asking if there's any more information about funds for regional navigators.
Yes, and I did provide a quick answer to that. Our hope is that we will be receiving some additional funds to be able to add a couple more regional navigators. We do have some parts of the state
laws work. We're instead.
Madeline?
Yes.
Madeline, sorry, you were frozen, so we were just talking, but I think you're going to have to start over from what you were saying because you were frozen. So.
Okay, can you?
Yeah.
Am I frozen now?
No, you're fine now. But you probably need to just start from the beginning because you froze up right when you got started. So.
Okay, I am sorry about that.
No, it's okay.
So our state labor trafficking law is not ideal because it doesn't cover all the kinds of things that we see in labor trafficking situations. So we are revising it to bring it into alignment with other states and with federal legislation. So this was an effort that we did with the Hennepin County Attorney's Office. They are the people who successfully prosecuted Ricardo Batres for forced labor, the only successful conviction under state law. So they also helped us redraft the legislation. So some of the major things that we did, first of all, we wanted to make the language simplified and really clear so that people understood what labor trafficking was. So the current language around debt bondage, for instance, talks about the status or condition of a debtor and uses like fairly convoluted language. So we just changed that to a person's performing labor or services to pay off a debt, and the labor and services are not defined and limited. Like very straightforward and clear language. We now call it forced or coerced labor to make it clear that we don't actually need physical force for something to be labor trafficking. And we also made things like we made sure that Minnesota law as it currently exists can be used. So right now, the law uses the term abuse of the legal process, which is from federal law, but that doesn't mean anything under Minnesota law. So we clarified that that is the misuse of an administrative, civil, or criminal proceeding against somebody in order to extract services. We also expanded the definition of harm. Minnesota had a fairly limited definition of what kind of harm someone could use in order to get someone to perform services. So it used to be that it could only be serious harm or physical harm or the threat of physical harm. And we've now changed that to physical harm, psychological, financial, or reputational harm. So really capturing the full range of labor trafficking experiences. And that's something that the majority of states have, that kind of expanded definition. And it's also the definition, federal law says serious harm, but they interpret that to mean physical, financial, and reputational harm. So we're covering the same kinds of things as other laws do. And so those are some of the big changes in the definition of labor trafficking. What we've also done is that we've created a new tier of sentencing options. So right now for labor trafficking, either you are labor trafficking a minor, in which case you have an enhanced sentence, or you are labor trafficking anyone else, in which case you have the standard sentence. And we wanted to really reflect the harm to victims. So now the highest penalty is if while you are labor trafficking someone, they are killed. And you, the trafficker, don't have to kill them. They can be killed because as a result of your trafficking, they're performing construction work in unsafe conditions and they fall from a roof and die. If they were doing that work as a result of the labor trafficking, that could result in an enhanced sentence. Then we have a middle tier, and this is the victim is a minor. The victim suffers gross bodily harm. or the trafficking happened for an extended period of time. So really trying to look at the victims, the harm to the victim, and make sure that in places where there's really significant harm, there's a corresponding penalty for that harm. So those are the big changes that have been made in the law. For anyone who was involved in the somewhat hurried review process, we have now the fully amended language in the public safety omnibus bill. It is in the omnibus bill in the House. The bill was also introduced in the Senate, but has not made it into the Senate's public safety omnibus. So it's something that's going to have to be worked out in conference committee, but it has no fiscal note attached to it. And so we're confident that it's a relatively non-controversial piece of legislation that should move forward without a lot of struggle. I mean, we'll see. I could be wrong on that, but that's the goal right now, is to get it passed, sort of just a straightforward improvement and clarification of the law, and make sure that we're adequately protecting victims. There's a handout on the Minnesota Human Trafficking Task Force webpage that's just a one-pager that talks about the reason for the law and gives that overview of changes that I've talked about. And so you can download that there and look at it if you want more information, and feel free to reach out to me as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Madeline. And it looks like the revisions have been dropped into the chat as well. Thank you. It sounds like we are going to have some busy times coming up in the conference committee as far as funding and policy goes in the next few weeks. So thank you, everybody, Beth, Bukola, Sarah, and Madeline, for all the work you've been doing at the Capitol. Please keep us up to date if you need anybody to do any advocating. I know the people here on the task force will be more than happy and ready to jump in and support. So with that, we're going to turn things over to our law enforcement partners for our presentation.
Hey, this is Tim Leslie, the sheriff in Dakota County. Thank you for having me today. I'm joined by members of the investigative team at Dakota County and the Electronic Crimes Task Force that we have. And so they'll jump in and supplement what I have to say. So this kind of goes back, thanks for inviting me. First off, this goes back quite a few years. We have had an electronic crimes investigative division for many, many years. However, it kind of broke down back in 2013, where Roger Holland pushed his pregnant wife down the stairs and killed her and their unborn child. That was in Apple Valley back in 2012. What happened was our investigator became so overwhelmed with just working on that one case that everything else got put aside. And if you want to think of it as a factory, our factory was backed up, and we weren't able to get to the cases that were coming. This back, in 2012, we weren't rubbing our crystal ball and thinking that cell phones were going to be a fad. However, it was back then, it was computers, and now it's cell phones that take up a bulk of what we do. So the chiefs of police in Dakota County and myself got together and decided we got to do a better job here of processing these cases and investigating crimes committed via cell phone technology, computer technology, etc. And so we created an Electronic Crimes Task Force in Dakota County, and now we are staffed with 6 forensic technology investigators that do the work for the county. We have received some accolades for that. The Humphrey Institute of Public Affairs at the University of Minnesota gave us a governance award back in 2015. We've had several others as well. The governance basically is everyone that's a member as a seat at the table, and the governing board. If you do not contribute a body to the task force, you contribute money, $21,000 per agency. And then with that money, then we begin the process of investigating all allegations, investigations that involve technology. And the first thing you do at a crime scene nowadays is you look for the cell phone. Why? because that is the diary, what's your photographs, it's the GPS, it's the who you just called, it's all those things tied together, and it gives us a wonderful start towards holding offenders accountable. Fast forward to 2017, we received a $450,000 Violence Against Women Act grant that would provide us a body, an investigator that would work just on violations of orders for protections, orders for harassment, stalking, those kind of behaviors that were targeting women, but mostly was of misdemeanor variety. And the dirty little secret in law enforcement and the criminal justice system is that despite the fact that the judge waves their finger at the offender and says, you cannot have contact with her, you cannot go near her home, you cannot have blah, 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 there's nobody out there that's monitoring that. And so what we see is after a period of time, the offender, usually a male, would text his former girlfriend, lover, husband, wife, spouse, whatever, and say, I miss you, right? And then he sits back and he goes, is anybody coming to get me? And by and large, in most communities, to come, quote unquote. In Dakota County, we take those seriously. The governance, the chiefs of police, the officers, deputies all understand that we have this person, that's what they do. And so they would capture those offenses. Again, the violation for order, the violations for the orders for harassment, and actually investigate those. And what we would always find is it wasn't just one time. It was usually a whole host of times. And we bring that forward to the court, and the court would find those offenders guilty and would hold them accountable. And what our theory and belief is that if you attack the problem at that core level and don't get them away, don't let them get away with those offenses, you then prevent stalking behaviors, choking behaviors, and ultimately the death of these victims. And we think it works. We've been advocating for it for years. We think it works here in Dakota County. And with that, I will turn it over to Captain Jim Gabriel and the members of the Electronic Crimes Task Force to fill you in further. Thank you very much for having us today.
Thanks, Sheriff. I'll be real brief. I think the sheriff pretty much covered what the ECU does, and Derrick Warnecke, who was the person who was hired under the grant the sheriff was talking about. And since that grant expired, the sheriff's office hired on Derrick because we knew how important this is to continue looking at these technology-based devices to help prosecute these crimes. So Derrick is now hired on the sheriff's office. The grant is done. But the ECU board and the chiefs of police and sheriff just know the importance of continuing to work these cases. And so Derrick is going to kind of talk about how we process those cases and what he does.
Yeah, thanks, here. I'll share my screen real quick. I just have a PowerPoint that and the sheriff had already gone through a lot of this stuff, so click through some of this pretty quickly, but I think it's pretty unique that we're doing this. And so typically with the grant, and now that I'm hired at the sheriff's office full-time, any domestic related cases that come in, I would be working those right away. So that's our general procedure, and that's not just me. Anybody in electronic crimes here, if they know that it's a domestic related or anything like that, they're stalking, they're going to take that and work that first. Also with that too, we try to do a lot of times while victims' phones come in, and to examine them, we want to get those back to those people right away. Essentially, I mean, everybody uses their phone nowadays, and so having a phone for an extended period of time, because any other case that would come in, typically it's first come, first serve, And so sometimes, depending on how many cases are submitted, that could be months before they would get that phone back. So obviously we see that that's not going to work. And so we try to get, if it's a victim's phone, we'll get those devices examined right away and get that back to them as soon as possible. So and typically we try to do that within a day and work around their schedules and stuff like that. Also, we've also worked with advocates and trying to, and domestic violence related victims, just safety tips for digital devices and online activity, just the better of aware of things that are out there nowadays. And typically, like the sheriff said, most nowadays a cell phone is what we're seeing a lot of. I mean, we still do get computers, tracking devices, and even security cameras and stuff like that. But our main thing that we're always examining is cell phones. Essentially, your cell phone is a smaller computer in your pocket that's more capable of doing a bunch of different things. And some of in the cases we found, just not too recently, we found, examined a victim's phone and the suspect's phone. The victim reported that they thought that there was some kind of tracking device because the suspect knew where they were a lot of the time. And I looked at the phone, the victim's phone. It was not on the victim's phone, but then looking at the suspect's phone, I was able to find email communication where the suspect bought a GPS tracker and also was communicating with the GPS tracker software that the GPS wasn't working correctly and indicating that he had put it in the victim's car. So with that information, I was able to provide that to the investigator for that agency, and they were actually able to find that GPS within the vehicle. And so we'll find a lot of that. I mean, in these type of cases, domestic and stalking related cases, even as basic as having access to their Google accounts where they can look at their calendars and things like that. We've also seen that quite a few times too. And kind of what I've touched on before, but the victims' devices, we're typically trying to just look at communication for the suspects and any signs of any of that spyware. And then when we're looking at the suspects' devices, we're looking at, communication, obviously, information, if there is any of that stuff, purchasing of GPS devices and or other stuff that can be used for stalking and domestic related things. Sometimes we'll see, I'll just go quickly through this. We'll see sometimes spyware or keyloggers. Essentially that spyware or keyloggers, essentially it's documenting every keystroke that you're taking. So they would be able to, your logins and password and email information and everything that you're talking to. Spoofing, this is a lot of times is used in those no contact. They'll spoof their phone number and make it appear as if it's a different number. They also do this with text messages, but typically there's catches. They're sending a text to the victim that's very that has a lot of information about their history and stuff. So it's no surprise that it's there, that it's the suspect communicating with the victim there. Again, we've seen GPS devices and things like that in cars and installed. Just location data, and this is where spyware kind of comes into. It's using the location data that's the GPS capabilities that are built in on a phone. They're just monitoring where you're going and things like that. Also, location data from social media sites that you're sharing. We also like to kind of inform people, be aware of what you're putting out there on social media, because that's a lot of information, especially if somebody is actively looking at everything that you're doing. And we've seen it with even home security cameras. A lot of times nowadays, these are going to be really high quality stuff and pretty inexpensive. Again, just online data, there's a lot of information about you online. Just be aware of what's out there. And social media as well. I mean, there's people sometimes overshare too much about their lives. And they should cautious of who you're sharing or who you're sharing that information with, who your friends are, things like that, and what information people can access your account when just looking at it, even if you're not a friend. Then a lot of times we'll see this in domestic related incidences where it's a family account, it's a family sharing plan. And so they can see all the information of who that person is calling. It's just another way people are tracking each other. That is all I have. Anybody has anything to add?
I'll just add that so our electronic crimes unit handles 300 plus cases a year. They take in, obviously the majority of it now is cell phones, as Derrick alluded to. Computers, we still take a lot of those computers in child pornography cases and those types of cases. But the majority of the stuff we're doing is cell phones. We got a lot of that equipment is not cheap. We use different databases and computers and softwares that cost a lot of money to do this. So as the sheriff alluded to, each agency that doesn't contribute, a person over at the ECU contributes $21,000 into the budget every year to help fund what we do. Meredith, you have anything to add? Meredith was one of, so I'll introduce Meredith Peik here. So our ECU, like the sheriff alluded to, has been around since 2003. It was originally just in the sheriff's office. And Meredith was one of those, one of two people that has been working in the ECU before we got to this collaborative effort in 2017, but 2015 rather. So I'll let Meredith talk on some things.
I don't have a lot to add. Derrick's PowerPoint kind of covered a lot of it, and we've talked about how we've formed this task force and how it works. I guess I would say is that one of the great things about our task force, I mean, aside from what's great for us is having multiple people to work with, but is the awareness it's raised, I think, with all the different agencies to be thinking about electronics and how they play into every type of life, but crime they're seeing. So we do, Derrick talked a lot about the domestic assaults and stalking because that's where his grant is, but we take and work with the agencies for devices they find in any sort of crime that's reported to them. So, we do a lot of criminal sexual conduct, sexual exploitation of children, and having all these people, we're able to really, in most cases, we've really cut back, as the sheriff said, when we started, the one person just wasn't able to keep up. So it's still a lot. There's still a lot of cell phones with 300 cases, but we're able to cut down the backlog significantly from what used to be, 8 months a year sometimes to, cases where we have victims, where we try to return the phone immediately, where it can be turned around in 24 hours to, still bringing it down to weeks rather than months and months usually when we can turn cases around.
Yeah, I think that's an important, it's been mentioned a couple of times, we want these victims to turn their phones over to us so we can help prosecute that case. And obviously that's a burden that we all know without our cell phone, we're lost. And every time we leave the house or go wherever, we got to make sure we got our cell phone, right? So we want to not create any more burden upon these victims by holding their cell phone any longer than we have to. So we try and get them to cooperate and sign that consent form. We can, we only have their phone for a few hours, and we can pull off what we need to and return that phone back to the victim, because that's, so important in everybody's lives, and so we don't want to inhibit them from coming forward, knowing that they're, they may be out, without their phone for extended period of time. So we really try and work with the victims to try and get those phones and get them back to them as quickly as possible. So, but yeah, that's all we have. I know the sheriff's answered a few questions in the chat room. If anybody has any other questions, feel free to ask.
Can I just touch on one thing briefly? is sometimes there's concern, and I think Meredith can allude to this too, that there's concern about what's going to be found on the victim's phone. And scope is only relative or related to what crime we're investigating. We don't care about all that other stuff. And so, we want to calm the victim, make sure they understand that, what we're up to. The other piece I just wanted, and I put it in the chat, others can, look, if they didn't see it, this is a culture we've created in Dakota County. And replicating culture is not an easy, ABC 1, 2, 3 thing. But it's taken us a long time to get there. But the culture now is that the officers and deputies that are the ones who are on the front line, the one who actually goes to the home and sits down with victims, they get this. They understand that we can hold offenders accountable through the ECU because we have Derrick, because we have Meredith, because we have Gabriel, because we have an investigator from Apple Valley, from Burnsville, from Lakeville. We have this culture we've created that we hold offenders accountable here. And we really do take those misdemeanor violations seriously. We don't look the other way just because they're a misdemeanor. And I think that's the key to this whole thing, is how we hold people accountable is we come knocking. We come after you if you continue to harass, stalk, and violate orders for protection that the judge sets forth. And I think that's what's different in Dakota County than what other counties have experienced, other communities have experienced. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Sheriff Leslie, and to your whole team. I remember when this work got started a few years ago in Dakota, and you just made an incredible difference. I'm wondering if you can, before Bobbi Jo starts up, if there any advice you might have for the advocates who are here on the presentation today about how to help educate their victim survivors that they're working with about technology safety and being prepared to work with law enforcement on sharing information.
Gosh, I'd turn that over to Meredith or Derrick. I know a little bit about a lot of stuff and not much about anything.
Yeah.
I think you kind of, Sheriff, touched on it a little bit there, quite a bit too. I think the main thing is when, at least that I've seen with advocates working with victims, is there's always that hesitation about turning over the device just because they're scared of that's a personal thing. You don't want to turn over everything to somebody to have access to and look at and things, and just building that relationship that know that they're gonna, we're only looking at this isolated incident. We're looking at communication between you, the victim, and the suspect, or whatever communication or whatever is sent. And we're just looking at that. I think that's a big thing because there is, I think, a lot of sometimes not a whole lot of trust there that they think they're going to get in trouble because of that. And I think just as a technology side, just be aware of what's out there. And sometimes people, I think they need to trust their instinct if they think that this person is knowing too much information about your life and that you're not sharing it with them. That could be signs that maybe somebody is stalking or having some kind of access to some of your devices. To be aware of that and then to report that and build a relationship with an advocate that you could trust, and then go to law enforcement, because I think a lot of times too, they just don't want to report that stuff because they'll think I'm, this isn't happening, and they'll dismiss my stuff. So I think it's just a whole kind of collection of just building that trust with law enforcement and with the advocates help to kind of do that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and what I would add to what Derrick said, which he's touched on, is, but one of the problems with cell phones is to pull the data, we usually end up getting a large portion of it. It's not only are we not interested, we work hard to make sure that we're working with the victims and the advocates to be specific in their consent on the phone, what they want us to look at, because with that, we can use it to only return the things they consented to, only those specific chats, only those go forward and go into the investigation in an attempt to make sure that the contents of their phone also don't become available to the person who's stalking them or harassing them at a later date in the process. So we keep we keep only what is absolutely, necessary for this and what's been consented to, and nothing else is kept or stored here, is how we have worked with that. And then for the, advice, I think some of it is Derrick touched on a lot of the specific stuff. Trust your instincts. There's a lot of ways people can find out about you, and if you're not giving them that information, you should work with someone to figure out how they're getting it. But a lot of the basic things are some of the same basic things they talk about with, computer security. Change all your passwords. Don't use anything that's related to, family or children or things somebody could likely guess. There is, on most accounts you use, two-factor authentication, so that if you put your phone number in, anytime anybody's trying to log in, because we sadly have a lot of people in these, domestic situations that knew each other's passcodes and can just log into your account and see everything. So those are, that's some of the basic security. Those are our, first things we recommend. There's obviously a lot more to it, but that's the sort of simplest way to start with those couple of things.
Great. Thank you so much. Very much appreciated for everything. I know we might have a few more questions in the chat if you can stick around while Bobbi Jo presents, but we really appreciate all of the work that you're doing and your time joining us this morning. I'm going to turn things over to Bobbi Jo.
Thank you, Caroline. And first, I just wanted to say thank you to Sheriff Leslie and the rest of the Dakota County Sheriff's Office team. You guys are amazing. And as we go through my presentation, I'm going to talk about how cyber tips are off the hook and have grossly increased. And it really takes robust teams like Dakota County that prioritize these crimes and are doing amazing things collaboratively with the BCA. The Dakota County Sheriff's Office are not only members of the ICAC statewide task force out of the BCA, but also members of the human trafficking statewide task force. So thank you, Dakota County. The other thing I have to mention is Sarah Ladd. That was amazing how you were able to present and not skip a beat and take care of your daughter at the same time. Impressive. And thanks to technology that is allowing for us to be able to do things like that. All right. Oops. My name is Bobbi Jo Pazdernik, and I am the Assistant Special Agent in charge of the Predatory Crime Section at the BCA. The Minnesota BCA Predatory Crimes Section investigates internet crimes against children, human trafficking, both sex and labor, and our predatory offender registrations, the level 3s that go non-compliant. We have 9 agents throughout the state right now. We are definitely in need of additional agents and are working on the hiring process to get more agents. But we also have a statewide human trafficking investigators task force. And the mission of our human trafficking task force is to provide coordinated and collaborative statewide assistance with human trafficking investigations, prosecutions, victim recoveries, and trainings through a victim-centered approach. Our task force was created back in 2017. And I had led that task force since its creation up until January when I was promoted to run the predatory crime section. So the predatory crime section works collaboratively with the statewide human trafficking task force. All right, when Caroline asked me to present to this task force about technology, my first thought was, oh yeah, not my cup of tea. But when I thought about what technology means in my world, it really is 100% my cup of tea, right? You heard from the Dakota County team. This image that I found when I Googled technology is the exact image that I had pictured when I thought about technology. Our kids are on every electronic device imaginable, and they are better with electronics than most of their parents. I know I can speak for myself. My daughter is way better at maneuvering the electronics than I am. So with that, where do you think the predators in our state go? They absolutely go to the technology. They go to the same spots where kids are at, and right now, it's all about technology. So like I said, our group, the Predatory Crime Section, investigates sexual exploitation of minors, which includes online solicitation, sextortion, the child pornography, it's now referred to as child sexual abuse materials, or CSAM, sex trafficking, and labor trafficking. Well, with all of these crimes, they are mainly done through electronic devices, social media, and other web-based programs. It's technology. Predators have moved away from stalking the malls, looking for kids. Trafficking has moved away from walking the track. Why? Technology provides a means of anonymity. You can be whoever you want to be, and a lot of times parents are not aware of what sites their kids are on. We all need to do a better job of monitoring our kids because the predators are. There currently are so many social media sites where kids are on that we as a whole, the ICAC task force, the Human Trafficking Task Force, I'm sure Dakota County will agree, we can't keep up with all of these sites. And they're ever evolving, they're ever changing, they're multiplying. And these are just some of the favorite sites that kids are on, also being used for sex trafficking and labor trafficking. If you see down in the corner of my little screen captures WeChat, when I talk about labor trafficking, WeChat is the Chinese version of Facebook. And a lot of the advertisements for labor trafficking and or sex trafficking are done through WeChat when it comes to soliciting or recruiting labor trafficking and sex trafficking victims from China. So, facilitation. These devices are used to facilitate these crimes, right? Searching for victims. Again, they go to where the kids are at. Researching the victims. Dakota County talked about this. They can find out so much information about an individual's family, where they live, where they go to school, family members, on, just by going to the social media sites, because we're not protecting these sites. We're not protecting our personas on the internet. Grooming is done. Again, it's easy, right? Just hit up somebody and start a conversation. And then as the conversation goes, you know, they're researching what vulnerabilities can I attack? What can I use to get this person into my control, whether it's a child, a minor being solicited, or an adult. Facilitating meets, buying photos, taking photos, soliciting photos, and agreements, all done through technology. And again, advertising. Sex advertisement, same thing. So many different sites now, we can't keep up. It used to be Backpage. Backpage is gone, and now they're all over. So just real quick, I wanted to do a quick case study, just because I think this is near and dear to this particular task force's mind. The MDH task force has a tip line that people can email. I'm not sure, Caroline, if they can call in too, but this particular case came in through this task force's tip line. And then Caroline and I believe Mary had forwarded the email to myself to investigate it. So what happened was there was a mother of a 10-year-old girl, 10 years old, okay? The mother emailed this task force and wanted help, didn't know who to reach out to. The 10-year-old girl was being solicited by a 33-year-old man from Minnesota who wanted to come and take the 10-year-old girl for the purpose of sex. He had actually found her through her gymnast page. He had a fix on young, very young gymnasts, and he was purposely searching out young gymnasts that he could solicit. So after the mom and I chatted, and the mom agreed for me to do so, I was able to take over that chat. And we talk about technology. We talk about technology that the predators are using and technology that we as law enforcement are using, because we need that same technology to keep up with them, right? So I took over that chat and I pretended to be that 10-year-old girl, and eventually was able to identify that this individual was a compliant level 3 sex offender in Minneapolis. The conversations were extremely sexual in nature, and he even came up with a plan to come and get me. Instructions about how I was going to be leaving my phone at home because he didn't want anybody to be able to track me. He provided photos of the place where he was going to take me, which ended up being his apartment. And his apartment was right next to a park in Minneapolis where he could watch kids playing soccer, swinging, whatever. So it was a high priority case for us, and we executed search warrants at his residence, and we seized these devices. Just like Dakota County has their own forensic lab, the BCA does as well. And these devices, several of them between phones and gaming devices and iPads, other sorts of tablets, we sent those all to our BCA crime lab. And we were not only able to recover the undercover chat that I was having with the individual, the chat that was had with the real 10-year-old prior to me taking over, we also unfolded multiple images of CSAM or child pornography, most of them young and somehow related to the gymnast field. So again, technology, they use it to prey on our kids and our adults. Us, we need it to be able to investigate and to get the evidence that we need to be able to prosecute these individuals. Sheriff Leslie held up his phone and he said, yep, everything's on here, right? These are our livelihoods. For law enforcement, those devices are gold. That is the biggest piece of evidence that we will have in our investigation for these types of cases, right? I mean, drug trafficking, you have the drugs. That's their biggest piece of evidence. For us, it's this. This is gold. And I'll admit, my life is attached to my phone. So if I ever lost that, it'd be like losing my whole life, my whole livelihood. So the Human Trafficking Task Force, as well as the ICAC Task Force, we do proactive operations. It's part of what we do. There was a lot of pressure during some of the national events that were hosted in Minnesota and Minneapolis, St. Paul, over Super Bowl, Final Four. And I really wanted to address that quickly because there's a lot of myths around national events, right? There's this hype that Super Bowl is going to come into town and it's going to create sex trafficking or exploitation of minors. Well, human trafficking is built around the business model of supply and demand, okay? That's what it's all about. National events, local events don't create human trafficking. What it does is increases the population, which in return allows for traffickers to increase the supply. They are there to make money, right? Money, money, money. What we experienced during the national event operations, the proactive operations, It wasn't that kids were being abducted from bus stops or anything like that, but the traffickers were forcing their current victims to work longer hours and several days in a row. Like, who knew? I didn't know that Super Bowl was 10 days, right? So traffickers were forcing their victims to work 10 days straight. Final Four was 5 days. PGA, it's a week. It's about making sure that the commodity is there when the demand is increased. So because of that, we work very hard to curb the demand. We not only work proactively during national events, but on a quarterly basis, we are conducting demand suppression operations. And the BCA does focus on juvenile demand because we have to prioritize some way, right? So we focus on reducing the demand of sex buyers who want to buy kids. We do that on a quarterly basis all across the state of Minnesota. And as you can see from some of these pictures, these are command posts that I had run while I was running the task force. It takes a lot of technology on our part too, right, to make this happen. I mean, what a mess of cords and everything that we utilize to make these things go. Again, supply and demand. Theoretically, if we could wipe out the demand, there would be no reason for traffickers to bring that supply. When we're talking about recruitment over social media, it's a gold mine for us, you know? I mean, look at some of these examples of what's happening right in front of our faces. Choose up, you know, showing the money, right? Come to me. Hey, daddy. More social media recruiting right in front of our faces. And then the emojis or the secret codes that traffickers, sex buyers, those that are soliciting minors for sex, they are talking covertly in front of us by using these special emojis. And all you have to do is Google, I think I just Googled sex trafficking emojis or something like that, but I know this is going to also be offered as part of a recording. Okay, so I had talked about when Backpage went down, right? Back in April of 2018, FOSTA SESTA was a U.S. Constitution Act that empowered the victims, the survivors, to be able to have some civil recourse against the companies that were advertising them for sex trafficking or for prostitution. Well, Backpage was seized, and that happened on a Friday. I knew by Monday there was going to be another site that took over Backpage, okay? It didn't get rid of sex trafficking. It spread sex trafficking advertisements around to many different sites. So when I talk about the different social media sites that we can't keep up with, same thing with the sex advertisement sites, except for now, most of them are hosted overseas so that we can't get any sort of court order response from these companies. But these are some of the main sites that we have used when we are working sex trafficking investigations and or proactive operations. Okay, so I mentioned that our cyber tips are off the hook and out of control. Cyber tips are the reports that both come in from the public, but mainly from our electronic service providers to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. So what happens is they get reported to NCMEC, and then NCMEC determines what the jurisdiction is or attempts to determine the jurisdiction, and then it gets sent out to the state where the crime is occurring and or the victim is at. If you look at some of these charts, back in, I guess it's a little small for me to read, back in 2015, the reports were 4,400, and in 2020, they had increased to almost 22,000, okay, NCMEC reports. And then you look at the ICAC stats in Minnesota, 2015, 2,200, 2021. This shows 5,082. It was mid-year that this chart was done. We ended up with about 6,000 cyber tips coming just to Minnesota in 2021. Then you can see the types of reports by category, all of them increasing. The CSAM, the child pornography, online enticement, sex trafficking, sexual molestation, on and on. With that, we also need resources like the unit in Dakota County to be able to forensically examine all of these devices that we are seizing from these investigations. So you can see that those have also increased. So I broke this down a little bit to kind of give you guys a better idea of what this really means to us. Okay, in February of 2022, just a couple of months ago, we had 849 cyber tips that came in. That's just one part of our job, right? We also have 18,803 total predatory offender registrants, 33 of them non-compliant level 3 offenders. With those 849 tips, and I'm talking just cyber tips alone, we investigated 269 of them, okay? 137 we were able to refer out to other agencies, 443 were able to close. But 269 in 1 month by 9 BCA agents means 30 cases per agent per month. That doesn't include all the human trafficking tips, which has been on the rise ever since 2017 when we created the task force. And it doesn't include the non-compliant level 3 offenders. That's just the cyber tips. I don't have the numbers yet for March of, or I do have the numbers, it just wasn't in the chart. March of 2022, they increased to 1,013 tips. What that means for us this year in 2022, we are on track to receive over 10,000 cyber tips from NCMEC that all need to be handled. And that is all that I have for today. This is my contact information. Anybody that wants to report directly to the BCA can call our main line. It's the 651-793-7000, and you can either ask for the Human Trafficking Task Force or you can ask for the Predatory Crime Section. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bobbi Jo. We knew it was bad, and those are very shocking numbers. So thank you for reporting that to us. And I also just want to acknowledge for you and your colleagues at the BCA and the folks from Dakota County too, that it must be incredibly hard to be interacting with this material on a regular basis. And I know we certainly are focused on the victims, but I also want to acknowledge how hard it must be on the law enforcement side investigating these cases too. So thank you for all that you do. Does anybody have any questions for any of our presenters? We can put them in the chat if you have them. Okay. Well, please do add them into the chat if you have them. And I think we will turn things over to Julia, who is going to continue on to talk a bit about safety in the context of technology. Thank you, Julia.
Thank you so much, Caroline. Everybody, hello. I am so happy to be here. My name is Julia Tindell. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I am the new Sexual Violence Prevention Program Planner at MDH. Full disclosure, this is my very first time doing a presentation on WebEx. And so bear with me if I have some technical stuff that we got to work with. But we're gonna move forward. I've got the chat open and the Q&A open, so please feel free to chat to me as we're talking today. And I want to get started by getting to know who's in the room a little bit better. And I would love for you to chat in for me. What are some of your favorite ways to use technology for fun, relaxation, or connecting with other people? So as I said, my name is Julia, and on the screen you'll see this little person is my avatar on Animal Crossing New Horizons. She's very cute, in my humble opinion. Her name is Julia, spelled Giulia, and I love playing Animal Crossing. It's one of my favorite ways to chill, to relax. I like to go and visit other friends' islands. And, one of my favorite things about it is I can like take out a housing loan and pay it off by running around and catching butterflies and fish and stuff and selling them to Tom Nook or whatever. Anybody who plays Animal Crossing knows just how fun it is to get those loans down. And I just think, man, if I could pay off my student loans by catching butterflies, I would do that in a heartbeat. Oh my gosh, thank you everybody for chatting in. I see the Daily Wordle, Allison. Yes, absolutely. I love the Wordle. I think that's Mary is saying FaceTiming with your nephew. I love that. Oh, Stephanie, we love podcasts. Caroline, Scrabble, connections and music and Netflix and WhatsApp. These are awesome. Thank you, everybody. Please feel free to keep chatting in, and folks can look. We see jigsaw puzzles. Ooh, planning your next vacation using the Calm app. Absolutely. There are so many great ways that we can use technology together as a way to connect and have fun and to enjoy one another. Now, today we're going to be talking about, of course, and have been talking about some of the challenging ways that technology is used specifically to facilitate human trafficking. And in this particular presentation, we're going to be focusing on how we can prevent technology-facilitated trafficking. And so here you'll see our learning objectives for the day. I'm hoping that we're going to be able to identify some opportunities to integrate prevention into your work when you're addressing technology facilitated trafficking. We're going to try to locate some additional resources to help you deepen your understanding of the topic. And we're going to connect with potential partners to collaborate and share information and resources. Now, you may have noticed that it is 10:14 a.m. and we've only got 15 minutes left of this presentation. So I'm really going to need your help communicating with one another in the chat and communicating with me to share ideas and resources. At the end of the day, I'm not the expert. You are the expert in the populations that you're working with, the work that you're doing. We just heard from Bobbi Joe and from Dakota County about their great expertise. And so I want to hear from you, and I want you to share your expertise with others as we go along. And in that way, we can accomplish these learning objectives together. And to get started, I would love to ask you again in the chat, what are some of the ways that you have seen technology influencing human trafficking? And by today, I didn't mean today our presentation, although if that's what's sticking out to you, absolutely, I would love to hear the things that stuck out to you from Bobbi Joe's presentation. But I would love for you to think about, whether it's trainings that you have attended, whether it's your own experience as an advocate, of course, providing, no detailed information, but, things that you have seen and experienced when you've been working with victims and survivors. You could think of maybe reports that you've seen or read, or maybe even personal experiences that have happened to people who you know. But what are some of the ways that you see technology influencing human trafficking today? Ruth, thank you. I see creating a desire to be sexy. And I can maybe extrapolate from that people, want to use like filters on Instagram and Snapchat to try to or use poses to be to present themselves as sexy. Anybody else? What are some of the ways that you see technology influencing human trafficking? I think that could be like social media that you're seeing that's being used, or games. What do you see? TikTok, absolutely. Yeah, TikTok, it's one of those things where it can be a powerful tool to laugh at a dog who may or may not have bones any given day. I don't know if y'all are aware of, I forget the dog's name. There's a pug who, he's having a bones day, or he's having a no bones day. And that's fun, but it can also be used in lots of scary ways to connect with people in ways that Bobbi Jo was just talking about. Flora says it's glamorizing the idea of sex trafficking being positive work, and it's totally inaccurate. Thank you. Becca shares looking for connection and love that people are not getting in real life. Absolutely, especially in COVID times, right? When it's so challenging to connect with other people. Faith shares, in my work, I see a lot of non-consensual dissemination and or abusers threatening dissemination. Absolutely, and that is heartbreaking. And Caroline shares, new apps are coming up all the time, as Bobbi Jo said. Youths are always seeing new ways to connect on apps. That is totally true. And today, I want us to focus on a particular kind of trafficking, a particular kind of risk that's coming up. And Bobbi Jo and I did not coordinate this. So it just happens that we are both talking about the same specific topic. And so I'm just gonna, I'll remind you of some of the things that she already shared and maybe dig a little deeper into some other kinds of platforms. So when we're thinking about prevention today, this is the example that we're going to be using to think about ways that we can incorporate prevention into our work. So as Bobbi Jo talked about, online enticement and child exploitation are a major issue that we are seeing today. And online enticement specifically is when an individual is communicating with someone who they believe to be a child using the internet with the intent to commit a sexual offense or abduction. It's like the example that Bobbi Jo shared earlier of the 10-year-old girl who had been targeted by the person who was trying to arrange to see and to take her. Online enticement includes sextortion, which is anytime a child is groomed for sexually explicit images, for sexual purposes in a face-to-face meetup, for sexual conversations online, or for selling and trading a child's sexual images and perpetrating that kind of sexual harm. And it takes place across platforms. And Bobbi Jo talked a lot about social media and messaging apps. But one of the things that I want to highlight is that this is also happening on gaming platforms. When we talk about making sure that we are being inclusive of how men and boys might be targeted, boys especially are really being targeted on gaming platforms, things like Twitch and Discord, and also games where there might be chat rooms available for strangers to reach out to them. So that's an area that it's really important for us to invest more attention in and to learn a little bit more about those so that we can ensure that we have a holistic view of the threats that are facing young people and then ways to prevent those threats from happening. And to go a little bit deeper, I'm going to highlight this statistic that Bobbi Jo shared just once more, which is that the online enticement is increasing. We saw in 2020 reports of online enticement to NCMEC's cyber tip line grew by 97.5%. That is a huge jump. And we've just pulled out some of these numbers again from that presentation we saw in 2019. There were 19,000 reports. In 2020, there were just under 38,000 reports. And in 2021, there were even more reports. That major jump was sustaining. So we know that this is something that we need to be mindful of. And I see a comment in the chat. Darian shares, I once worked with an 8-year-old that was solicited in a game chat room through a school-issued iPad. This was before the increased use of iPads and technology as a result of COVID and distance learning. Thank you so much for sharing that, Darian. Absolutely. Game chat rooms are certainly a place where solicitation is happening. And you're right, this has been a problem since long before COVID happened, but it might be, we're seeing these increased rates, and that can definitely be connected to, young people are going online to get connection, especially because they're not necessarily able to see friends and other people in school and environments where they might have previously. Thank you so much, Darian. As a parent, I ask about access to internet and technology during play dates. And that, I think, is a great transition and a great example. And we're going to transition into talking about ways that we can prevent this from happening. Now, the CDC uses a framework called the social ecological model, which I'm sure you are all familiar with, or many of you are familiar with. But just as a reminder, the social ecological model is really an approach to planning upstream interventions. We want to prevent the violence or the solicitation from happening in the first place. And there are, these 4 levels of the social ecological model help us to make sure that we are using holistic strategies. So it's not just up to a young person to protect themselves. It's not just up to a parent to chase after the technology that we have been talking about has been growing so quickly. But it's really everybody's responsibility together, and there are opportunities for everybody to intervene. So the different levels are first individual levels. And so we can look at risk and protective factors as well as opportunities for intervention here. So there might be risk and protective factors at the individual level related to personal characteristics, related to behavior, related to personal experience. So for instance, that might be age, or might be a young person who really loves to play games or loves to go on Twitch or has a Twitch channel. Then we've got the level of relationships, and this could be between parents and guardians and children. This could be friendships. This could be romantic partnerships. Just those intimate one-on-one relationships is the level that we're talking about here, like a smaller group or familial relationship. The third level is the community, and this one can be very broad. Just think about what different community might mean to you. And those are some of the places that risks could occur and that there would be opportunities for intervention. So this could be schools, this could be workplaces, this could be neighborhoods, it could be faith communities, it could be, communities can be physical entities, or they can be they can be spaces that other people are communicating with one another, just anywhere where you're making meaningful connections with people, that we can very broadly define community. And the final level is the societal level, which is where we're changing social norms, we're changing cultural norms, or social or cultural norms might be contributing to risk and protective factors and policies. And so the FOSTA SESTA policy that Bobbi Jo mentioned earlier might be an example of an intervention that was designed to try to prevent online solicitation. And I'm seeing another comment in the chat from Caroline, who says there are more one-to-one chat rooms internationally where you get connected with a stranger. Many youth are using those to try and make friends in other countries, leading to many problems, unfortunately. Absolutely. I mean, that's the thing about the internet, is that it presents us with so many opportunities to connect with different people, and what a great idea. And then unfortunately, it can be, as we've talked about, a space where people take advantage of that and serious harm is caused. So what I want you to do is I want you to help and think with me and think through the lens of the work that you're doing about some of the ways that we can look at the technology facilitated trafficking we've been learning about today through a lens of prevention. So I'm going to give you an example here, and then we're going to work together through an example and come up with some ideas together. So an example of individual level risk and protective factors and approaches to address online enticement and child sexual exploitation are looking at risk factors. We can see age might be a risk factor for a variety of reasons. Young people have literally their brains are not developed in a way that they are equipped to process cause and effect in the same way as an adult. Thank you for the reminder, Mary. And gender identity might be a factor. For instance, according to the Pew Research Center, players of online video games are disproportionately boys, and 97% of teen males play video games on some device. And so gender identity as a boy might increase the risk of online enticement in game playing spaces. Lack of awareness of risks is an example of a risk factor to boys, and use of video games and other online platforms with open channels of communication, like Caroline just shared with us, could be a behavior that could increase risk of online enticement and child exploitation, as well as loneliness and isolation, especially as related to COVID-19, as we've been talking about. And so an example of an intervention that could be used to try to prevent this is a resource that you'll see on the screen here, which is NetSmarts Into the Cloud. This is produced by NCMEC. The photo is from their cloud media kit, and anybody can go and access Into the Cloud. It is a very cool animated online safety adventure series. I forget the age that it's targeted towards, but if you are working with young people, or if you know parents of young people who are really struggling to communicate with the young people in their life, what are some of the risks and what are some ways that they can be safe? This is a specifically designed intervention that is supposed to help young people to recognize risks and learn how to respond if something harmful were to happen. And thank you so much, Mary, for posting in the chat the link to NetSmarts. You can take a look. Now, I don't think we're going to have time to do the activity component of this, but I want to encourage all of you to be thinking about what are the ways that you can incorporate a prevention lens into the work that you're doing with technology facilitated to prevent technology facilitated trafficking. Now, April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, which is one of the reasons that we are bringing up this conversation together. And the theme this month is building safe online spaces together. So there are lots of resources available at the NSVRC website, including a couple of great articles on things. There's one that I keep going back to called "Don't Be a Noob," and it's how to identify risks and how to prevent online enticement of boys who use gaming. And Amanda did clarify, thank you, that Into the Cloud is geared towards young people who are 10 and under. Here are a couple of resources that you can access later. We've got the link to SAM. We've got the link to more information about that NCMEC cyber tip line. And we've got the link to NetSmarts, which was also posted in the chat. And here we've got the list of the staff over at the Sexual Violence Prevention Program. Me and Beatriz, Mary, and Marissa are certainly happy to provide support, technical assistance, information, and training on any of these topics. And I know that the Safe Harbor program would love to do that as well. And with that, I will say thank you so much for your time, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much, Julia, and thank you for everybody who joined us on the meeting today, our amazing team from Dakota County, Bobbi Jo Pazdernik representing the BCA, and Julia with your helpful tips. And for everybody online with us today, if you have any questions, need any additional information, we will be happy to help you, so please reach out. Again, thank you and have a great rest of the day. Take care. Bye-bye.